Greetings again, students. John Greenhoe, PhDE 658. We're working our way through the course. And I am very excited today to have an opportunity to talk with Josh Birkholz, someone who I really feel is really an innovator in the field and someone who has done a lot in the donor data and really understanding communities within the donor community. And so Josh is the CEO of BWF in Minnesota. And they are a nonprofit service and technology company. They're known for their innovations in elevating philanthropy around the world. Josh is a leader in big philanthropy, architect of the business of fundraising. He is the author of the books Fundraising Analytics, which is sort of the Bible for me as far as data analysis and fundraising, and also Benefactors, which came out just last year. Josh is also chair of the board of the Giving USA Foundation. He's an instructor at Rice University Center for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership. And I am thrilled to interview him as a trailblazer in the field. So welcome, Josh.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to be here. As a St. Mary's alum, I'm really excited to be here.
I didn't know that, but that's pretty awesome. It's a great school. And I went to St. Mary's. Boy, it was 22 years ago I finished. So in the philanthropy development program, and now for some crazy reason I get to teach now, which is also good too. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you just interview you and hear some of your perspectives is because
Sure.
Your experiences in the phenomenon of donor digital engagement.
Hmm.
So I'm sort of a dinosaur. This is something that it takes me a little while to grasp completely because I was in the field for a long time, and but I've learned a little bit about it. But now I've learned a little bit more about social media and how that plays into it. But I think our students probably are a little more adept than I am. But I kind of want to ask you, like, sort of the growth of donor digital engagement. How has it kind of grown over the last 10 or 15 years?
Yeah.
And how is it furthering nonprofit fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, it's really grown rapidly in just the last few years. And I think it's partly necessity is the mother of invention. If you look at philanthropy, all the national trends from the Giving USA perspective, FEP and others, we've had this period of decades of dollars going up and donors going down. There's fewer donors giving, and we see that again and again in the data. And there's questions, is philanthropy becoming a thing of the rich? Well, I don't believe it has to be. And part of the reason are firms like ours, consulting firms that are hired to do a campaign, if your top 50 donors give to this campaign, you're probably going to hit your campaign goal. If you double the number of people that give, might scratch the surface. So there hasn't been the same emphasis. You take on top of that a lot of the promotions and the leadership and development tend to be towards the major giving side. The chief development officer will close really big gifts, and we see a higher rate of turnover at the base of support. So we've not seen the long-lasting commitment to innovation because the staff turnover. You'd get a new job, you're just learning the program. By the time you know it, you're moving on to your next thing. But then we've realized that there are some things that have turned donor engagement. One of those was the advent of the Giving Day. Actually, my colleague Justin Ware was the first to do one of those for Florida State University with Chad Warren. And we started to see Giving Tuesday has been increasing year over year to record numbers. It's a different sort of mechanism. We've started to see that digital's working at some really big places, but how is it that they're doing it differently? And I'd say mainly what they've discovered is we're not competing for attention for the philanthropic dollar. We're competing for attention. And a few donors or organizations have realized this. They realize we're competing in a digital marketplace against whatever's on your TikTok feed as you're scrolling through or on your Instagram. When I go to YouTube and watch a video, I don't get ads for my alma mater, but I sure do for St. Jude. I might get one for Charity Water. They've figured out a different type of a game, and we're starting to realize that partly because through this turnover, the traditional channels have been on the decline. Direct mail has generally been on decline. People say it's actually giving by check that's been on the decline. So direct mail with a QR code is actually working reasonably well. Phone has been on the decline, and we all know why. I mean, a stand-up comedian can talk about Gen Z and talking on the phone, or us old people and answering the phone. Like, no one's answering anymore and no one wants to talk on it. So we've realized we've seen some proof of concept in Giving Days, competing in the digital marketplace. And there's just so many areas that I'm sure we're going to get into and how those different channels have been effective, but I'll start there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and that is, you certainly have hit the nail on the head, and I know that I was somebody who was sort of grew up on direct mail, so I mean, I really did. That's kind of how I cut my teeth. So I know it's a different world. That's been 20 some years or so from now. But I'm curious about social media
Yeah,
platforms, and specifically when you're talking about Instagram and Snapchat, and God forbid TikTok and all those other things.
I
Um,
love TikTok. I have to admit, guilty pleasure. Go on.
My daughter uses TikTok all the time, so I don't know who's watching her, but whatever, it's fine. But I'm curious if you have thoughts about, in general, the kinds of social media platforms that,
Yeah,
because this class really does kind of focus in on sort of the base level
yeah.
givers. It's not the major givers. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how that all intersects. I mean, does it vary by sector?
It does. It does some. I mean, really, at the core of it is, if we think back to our direct mail days or even our phone days, the high cost was distribution. It cost money to print those letters and mail them. It cost money to do those phone calls, have the phone software, and all of that. Now in social media, the cost is content, not distribution. Distribution is basically free to cheap. And for a while there, we had this scaling down effect where you could only get to a certain percentage of your audience. But because of TikTok, which that has influenced Reels and others, if you're consistently churning out good content, it's going to keep going out. So the change across all these platforms is, first of all, the emphasis on lots of content, relevant content, and most importantly, authentic. Now, between which within those channels, we have had some evidence on authentic video, which leads itself towards Reels and TikTok having a lot of promise. Meaning, and what I mean by authentic video is we've done our own studies, as well as others have, on where we had the president of a university do a video. And then we had a student do a video. Which one did they watch? And it was like 20-1. They'd rather watch the student talk, or it's the program staff in the field, or a recipient of the gift, but rather than the one asking for the gift. And it was just really fascinating that people would sit, and if they sat and watched through the whole video, their likelihood to give was considerably higher than any other type of channel. So ways that someone can consume authentic messaging from someone that's not overly polished, that's real, that is mission aligned, seems to be the most effective. So I think we're going to keep seeing this change a little bit, but I lean towards those that enable delivering of authentic video. Now, does it vary by sector? We're only starting to scratch the surface of that, and partly we're scratching the surface because of the rise of better marketing automation software. So that'd be like your HubSpot, your Marketing Cloud are probably the two I hear the most. There's certainly lots of platforms. I'm not meaning to pick one out, but just as
Sure.
four examples. And like we use HubSpot at my company, for example, and we build I'm a data scientist by at my core. So we've built our own predictive models to see when people come to look at our content, who moves on to then reaching out to us. And so
Yeah.
we're measuring and we're seeing certain channels work better for us. And we know that if we're able to do that, any nonprofit can do that. But where I said we're scratching the surface is we're just in the early days. A lot of people are first putting in Marketing Cloud or putting in HubSpot. So I think we're still gathering that information.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's exciting because even though it's been growing for a while, I mean the sky is still the limit. I mean it just
Yeah.
seems like there's no upper echelon to it. Interestingly, talking about the donor experience and talking about kind of how you reach people digitally, I read something that you wrote a little while back about philanthropy from the perspective of the consumer marketplace.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. I mean, like many, I use Amazon every day. So,
Totally.
you talk about the alignment between sales and various levels of giving, base level, middle, major, and so forth. But at the base level, you wrote there needs to be a predictable and comfortable process that's similar to what Amazon provides. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah, and I'd love to share more about the whole pattern, but I'll keep it on point because I'm a
Sure.
consultant, so I can keep talking and never
Yeah,
shut up.
that's
Got to
great.
right at
Yeah.
the end. But at the base of support, it's very similar to Amazon. If we want to buy socks or a book, we want to believe that we'll get the socks in the book. It'll be easy to buy. We count on it. I mean, Amazon's brilliant. We actually pay them to be loyal to them. I don't know if any other companies figured that one out before, but like we're actually paying them however much Prime costs so that we don't shop around. Brilliant,
Right.
absolutely brilliant. But at the core of that is trust. If I see something on another website, am I going to get ripped off? Is it actually going to come? Is this like a drop shipping? It's going to go through several different international ports and I'll see it 6 months from now, if at all. Or Amazon, it usually comes. So there's a trust, I believe. So if I see something on another site, I'm going to go to Amazon and see if it's there first. A lot of us do that if we have Prime.
Yeah.
There's the friction-free. You can buy with one click. And now I know I'm kind of off track. Now, for giving specifically, I remember back when I was in grad school, learning about how customer loyalty is developed. And it's through the consistent meeting of needs. So like if I first wanted to, I don't know, buy a TV, I might shop around and then Best Buy had a good price. I'm going to buy my TV at Best Buy. Or so maybe a computer, I shop around, I end up getting at Best Buy. Eventually I stop shopping around and I just go to Best Buy because I trust that buying experience, for example. I say that because I'm looking out the window at the Best Buy headquarters. So and that was the one that jumped to mind. I'm right next door to Best Buy.
You are there. Yeah, that's right.
That's right. But similarly, when you're giving a philanthropic gift, so much of us are focused on the fundraising, first of all. And fundraising, it should be easy to do. If I'm going through 10 pages of clicks, I'm going to bail on it. If I can give the gift quickly, that's so much easier to do. I mean, just the practicality of it. Second is when I give again, most donors evaluate not what it was like to be fundraised from or asked. They rate what it's like to be a donor, what the donor experience is. So not only how I was asked, but then what's it like after I've asked? The donor experience is a big drive. So when I say predictable and comfortable, I've often asked donors, what's it like to be a donor here? And that I find is a really telling thing that most of us focus so much on getting the gift, but we forget how much the donor values what it's like to be a donor. So I know I'm kind of all over, but I think it's friction-free. I trust that it's going to happen. Where the donor experience is relevant, the gifts are used the way I thought they would, and they told me that. So it ends up being a comfortable process. And one other aspect of it is Amazon feels kind of personal. At least it gives me things that it thinks I want. It might be wrong sometimes, and because my wife and my kids are also on my Amazon account, so I might not be looking for yoga pants, but I might be looking for other things that's coming on my Amazon feed. And what we've realized is major and principal gift donors, they get a lot of high touch. Even a mid-level donor will at least get to talk to a human, but at the base, where our interaction is mostly through a screen. And can we provide a more personal experience through that screen, through mass personalization, content that's relevant, someone speaking to me in a video that seems like someone like me, and that I can believe in that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about the simplicity and the reliability. I did a talk for some university folks, higher ed in Europe a while back, and I sort of picked on one of the individuals, and we went to their website, and I said, "How many clicks does it take to get to the giving page?" I think we got to 10. So I thought, oh my gosh,
That's not good.
And I'm a Luddite compared to you. So, but I knew that if it takes more than like 3, forget it. You'd like to be able to get it to it in 1. I understand that, but
Totally.
that's exactly the thing. So, but it's basic stuff, but I don't think a lot of people know it. One of the things I also wanted to sort of highlight was building community with donor populations. Yeah. So we know, and actually I read something, you talked about the fact that this is kind of about social proof, but giving tended to be greater among major donors who knew other major donors. Yeah. Fascinating. So when you look at that, and when you even look like more of a modest level, like Giving Tuesday, I mean, that's a form of a donor community, isn't it? And so how does that all fit together? What are your thoughts about, on the digital side, you're building community within each other, within the nonprofit?
Absolutely. So I've got 3 different studies that are coming together around this community building. And all of them we were trying to study donors that didn't stop giving when economic times were rough. Recessionary periods, we got inflation. I mean, we're at one of those periods of uncertainty where what's going to happen and so forth. And we found 3 consistent factors in donors that kept giving. One of them is their exposure in terms of breadth of the organization. I know multiple people at this organization as opposed to one person. Second, my exposure around the donor community, the more people I knew that were also donors. And the third is harder to define, but my identity as a donor. I am one of the donor community. So, and we've seen focus like through the digital channel, you're able to expose an individual to more of the organization, but specific on community. In fact, we actually saw 4 to 5 times the lifetime giving from donors just being friends with other donors. And we realized how many organizations are focusing on cultivating you to give to my mission, as opposed. Now, contrast that. Charity Water is one of the best at identity. They say, welcome to being a charity water donor. You've joined, these change makers that are changing the world. You're one of us.
Yeah,
and I was talking with one of their board members, and they said, honestly, we think people like being a charity water donor more than they actually care about providing clean water. The experience of being part of this group. And so, and it's not a heavy lift. In digital, it's very easy to have people in groups together to introduce them, to create peer groups and cohorts. Even in one-on-one, if we're doing mid-level annual giving and other things, it's very easy to be like, hey, you should meet my friend John. He thinks just like you do. You guys should chat. Just that introduction and talking will probably influence both your lifetime value giving by multiples. If you think about it, my relationship to this charity is also what ties me to 3 other people. It's harder to walk away from people, so it ends up being a tie to the charity because this is a common factor we have with each other. And on the identity development, we see that all the time. Apple on the corporate side, you buy an iPhone, maybe you buy another iPhone, you're getting your iTunes, then you get an iPad, then you get a computer. At some point, you're slapping Apple stickers on your water bottle and on your car window. You're no longer, I'm buying this product because I like it. I'm saying I am an Apple person. So part of this community development into identity is I am a person who supports this cause. And that provides me value and it provides me connection this way. It's something we don't often think as much in fundraising, but it's super, super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to think of like an Apple, and it just becomes part of your life and part of your personal brand. So, and we need to think about that as fundraisers, looking at it from that perspective. We're not completely in our own world. We do communicate with people in similar ways, and it's all top of mind. So it's fascinating. Yeah. Josh, you mentioned this earlier, talking about, and I know that some in this class are not engaged in the university fundraising, sector per se, but it's interesting because I did do that for a long time, and I worked with students in phonathons and things like that. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I've read, you talked about, you mentioned it earlier. Students are really not comfortable using the phone. Phonathons. People don't answer the phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I know all this very much. Major gift officer, even, only a few years ago, what are the chances you're going to get somebody's voicemail? Probably about 90%, maybe more than that. I mean, that's the way it is. But specifically thinking about how people do outreach and, even if it's like as an influencer or something like that, how does a student today digitally engage with a donor? They're not using the phone anymore. What are they doing to make those connections?
Yeah, it's actually something that my company, not as a commercial, but just I think it's really informative that we've actually found worked really well, is we took that phonathon concept, first of all, where you have a team of students, and we hired them, and we've done this at Mizzou, University of Texas, Austin, UC San Diego. We're all over the U.S. doing this, and we hire like 20 students, and we're basically teaching them to be influencers on campus. So they are going around, they're telling authentic stories. We're helping with the video production and editing to make sure that it fits university standards and so forth. But we want it to be as authentic as possible. But where we're finding it's working is it's almost like how a gift officer has a portfolio of donors. Like they might have 100 people that they're responsible for cultivating. We might have a segment of 10,000 for this student, and they're all getting the video from this one student. And in some places we actually are connecting it to phone, but when they get the phone call, it's the same kid that they're seeing on the video. So what they're doing is they're building a relationship and familiarity with a singular voice. And that voice is authentic because they're a student. We do pay the students, but they're not like a paid professional fundraiser. They're students that are benefiting from the campus experience. And we're finding that that's enormously effective. We've seen, more than blown away. The phone program, every university, we put that in the first year just by using these students. And there's really no fancy trick to it. It's talking like you would on a TikTok. Hey, I'm here in the Arboretum. This is super cool. I come here between classes sometimes to walk through. You should check this out. That kind of thing.
Right.
And then when it gets to giving days, those are the same voices that they're seeing on the video on their giving day. So on my giving day, I would get the student that I'm mostly hearing from giving me those messages. So it's basically mobilizing influencers. I know maybe influencers have a bad reputation, but we're trying to take the black hats and give them white hats. These are influencers for good. And it's been really, really effective. And we do see that working in other sectors, but probably more from program staff, like international relief is someone on the, like I have a niece who's working in Malawi. It's much more interesting to hear her talk about her experience in Malawi than the fundraiser back in the States who's raising money for Malawi. So like if you think about your program staff or your artistic staff, I remember during the initial disruption of COVID, how much I'm a big classical music fan, how much I enjoyed watching some of the orchestral members, like the violists, just like doing a thing on social media. I'm like, this is so cool. I can't go to the orchestra, but I'm getting a connection with a person. That's better than me getting a video from the president of the orchestra saying, why don't you get to the orchestra? So it's that same concept.
Yeah. You talk about the different, being like a social media influencer. One thing I just thought of is that when you're looking at the population that a lot of us are, where you're dealing with a lot of people who are 50 plus, or maybe even 60 plus. I guess the question I have is, are they people who are going to be accessing certain types of social media? Are they primarily going to be on Facebook? And how does that kind of enter into the equation, I guess?
Totally. Yes. I mean, Facebook is the most aligned with the older generation. My 18-year-old daughter doesn't even have a Facebook page. I mean, my 20-somethings do. So I don't know. I guess that was the cutoff. I don't know.
Right.
But I would say they use it. They use it jokingly because I better connect with what does my daughter always say? Facebook is to get birthday wishes from your mother's friends, which I think is kind of funny. I mean, there is some truth to that. It's older generation, but I can think of one example, and this was not for digital fundraising from the everyday donor, but I was working with a pretty substantial charity who had a $70 million gift from a Giving Pledge donor. And they wanted to, and this was an international relief group. It was for clean water in Africa and so forth. But what we really wanted to focus on is for so many donors, the experience is charity asks for me to a gift and then they go do the mission and the impact. We wanted to bring that so this donor is part of the impact equation. They are providing clean water, not they are providing money so that charity can provide clean water. We're jumping over that. And we created videos with them talking about their experience of having a direct impact in Africa with this clean water. And we took a group of only 12 donors and we sent that video just to their Facebook pages. Nice. Basically, so from their perspective, it was a video, but it was geared towards a high net worth audience just like them. And I know this is a very small subset, but I'm using it as an example. With the major donor community, we've seen it like with warming. When we start to send out videos about the campaign messages, the channel is a little bit tricky. Facebook, they might see it. We often send emails to the older generation because email is, in fact, there's less email responsiveness in the younger generation. So email and Facebook have become old people, apparently.
Right.
I mean, we all do email when we have to, but what we found is still the video works across generations. The channel by which they're going to see the video is a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating stuff when you think about it from that perspective. I've spent so much time on this topic. I guess I need to ask you in more detail. And it's something I kind of struggled with as a gift officer, but it's Giving Tuesday. And I really want to ask you a little bit about how you see that phenomenon growing. Is it going to lead to other things? Is it just a behemoth on its own? I mean, because it's so much digital. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing because it spurs giving in the United States. And I think of Jane Wales of the Generosity Commission, and she's been really trying to study the everyday donor phenomenon and why it's been declining. And her focus has been on that instrumentality. We give so that a thing can happen. And we maybe lost as a culture the intrinsic value that giving's just a good thing. Like when we were kids in religious circles, we saw our parents put money in the plate. When we're kids in a secular setting, we might see our parents buy the dollar and put the shamrock on the wall next to the cash register.
Right.
We've got this model philanthropy, giving's a thing. From that perspective, a lot of people hearing about it, it being reinforced as a U.S. value, even a global value, I think is a positive thing. I mean, the day of giving was probably Justin and Chad at Florida State first. That same year, Columbia did one that blew away Florida State's, but those both pre-existed Giving Tuesday. And I do think that day of giving with a day of celebration is effective. And I found for colleges and universities, having a separate day than Giving Tuesday is more effective. But it's one of those that you better also participate in Giving Tuesday, because there are enough people kind of like Black Friday that are just going to give on that day. So
Right.
whether we like it or not, I think it's a reality that we need to be present for Giving Tuesday. Now, do I like the phenomenon? Overall, I'd say I do like it. I like the organization and how they're really trying to provide a lot more research. They're beyond just doing the Giving Tuesday event now and trying to look at donor trends. They're partnering with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which is a group out of AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And that collaboration really shows that we know this is a phenomenon. How can we make sure it's a phenomenon for good? And I think they're making the right choices to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a gift officer, the thing that I sort of latched on to is that Giving Tuesday was a sort of a captive audience.
Yeah.
So if I had a major donor and they were probably going to make a gift anyway, we focused on that, and would you make this gift on Giving Tuesday? And we're going to highlight your gift to our population. So it's a stewardship thing as much. I mean, it's cultivation, it's stewardship, but it's like, because you think about this Giving Tuesday, which is wonderful because it does bring a lot of people in, but sort of the sideways part of it is, how do you retain these people? How do you keep them in your camp? And that's you can do it. It presents some new challenges for sure. I would say that, but there are, because it's an event-based type of thing, but it's fascinating to me.
It's so true. And those major donors love that. I've noticed board members and major donors who, for a lot of them, they feel the weight of this institution is on their shoulders. There's probably 50 people that are giving 80% of your dollars. And that's true at a lot, especially in the higher ed and healthcare sector, which are more top heavy than the other sectors. And when they see events like that, one of the benefits is stewardship of the major donors, that other people also care. It's not just on my shoulders, and there's a benefit to that. And on the retention, I think you nailed it. On all the giving areas, we have not invested the innovation into the donor experience like we could, and I think that's a real opportunity. I'm glad you had Penelope Burke and others that are who really focus on this. I think that's so critical. No matter what we talk about, remember what it's like to be a donor.
Yeah, absolutely. I read her book quite a while ago, but then when I talked to her just last week, I was blown away by some of the things. And like she said, which maybe I should have known this before, but she said most donors think for 7 to 12 years before they make a gift to the organization. I mean, it's not a knee jerk. They're very cautious about what they do. So it's all about the donor experience. So I know we have limited time, but there's one more question I wanted to ask you, and I will apologize to my students because it's a little off to the side a little bit, but I will say this, that I am really, I wrote a book a number of years ago about major donor discovery calls. So I'm very much interested in this topic, and you've written about the concept of digital warming, especially as it relates to major gift work. And, the whole scenario of having a name and, a phone number, and that's about it, and trying to get a visit with somebody. It's very cold, very cold. And I know that you've done some work in this area as far as how digital warming could change the equation, where when you directly reach out to these individuals, they're more receptive to at least talking on the phone or doing something like that.
Yeah, well, the concept of warming, maybe it's not new, but where I first landed in it was I was working with Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and we had identified this kind of a segment. We often call it the strike zone. They're the high capacity, high engagement. The people are likely to take a call right now from a gift officer. And we were measuring at what point does the discovery likelihood increase. And we found there's a certain level of engagement. It's kind of like the top 5% of engagement. But we had these high wealth people that had very low engagement. And that if we sent them out to the gift officers, they would be having so many declines that it would, first of all, be maybe demoralizing for them or frustrating that I'm just like, it's a fool's errand. But also the donors were not ready to be received. So we took this, what we call the VIP warming group, and we said, if we can get them to do anything to move up this engagement curve, once we get to the certain point, then it makes sense to deploy an in-person field staff. Now, we started out with events, trying to get them to activities just to do stuff. And then we started to realize that actually the digital channels were the fastest way to do that. And so what we've been doing now, and we've been experimenting with a lot of different areas, is so this is more of a high net worth thing in the warming, those that have high wealth and some modest connection. We've also surveyed them around their sentiment. How do they feel? We actually find their feelings are more predictive than their activity. If I perceive myself to be engaged, even if I've not done anything for 2 years, that's better than someone who's been here every month but doesn't feel engaged. I don't know, but it's in the psychology. We found that the self-perception of engagement is key. So what we've done is we took concepts around the why, very Simon Sinek, why this has importance, this is value, the priorities, why the campaign priorities are urgent, and did topical related video stuff, authentic video students and others, so that these high net worth folks can see that. And once we saw engagement, it would fire pixels, and then their likelihood to take a call right after say that pixel fired. And this has changed the language depending on the channel, but it sent some sort of indicator this person has engaged with content. And what we find is affinity is dynamic. We know that in healthcare, after a patient has care, they're more likely to give for the first 3 months.
Right.
In the arts, if you just went to the show at the Guthrie, you're more likely to give after that than if you haven't been there in 3 years, because the affinity is dynamic. We find when they're engaging with the content, they're likely to receive contact individually from that same institution is higher. So can we manufacture moments of affinity through the digital channel? That's what we're playing around with, and we're finding some success with it. Those that have engaged through social, multiple times more likely to take that call. Well, and when I say call, I wouldn't suggest calling them first. Maybe sending them a note or texting, or something else. But we're finding. And do we have that solved? No. Discovery is probably the hardest thing. I'm glad you wrote a book on it, because we need more books on this topic, because it is it's not easy. No one likes to meet people for the first time. So can we make it not feel like the first time? I'm hoping that we can figure out ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fascinating, the whole growth of, now we're, I just looking on my alma mater website, and I think we have 2 or 3 digital gift officers now. So it's like,
great.
Which is a totally new phenomenon. I do know what they do actually, but it's interesting. It took me a while to actually grasp exactly what it was, but no, this is really fascinating, Josh. I really appreciate your time, and
my pleasure.
I know that our students are really going to benefit greatly from hearing your insights, and probably, frankly, they're going to understand a lot better than I will. So that's all very good too.
You're great, wonderful questions. This is really fun for me. Thank you.
Well, good. I'm so glad to have had a chance to chat with you, and I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks all the students. Be well. Enjoy this profession. I absolutely love being in fundraising. I know you will too. If you're not already, you're going to love it.